So this is another episode of Thirsty for Knowledge Thursdays. This is brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. Just to make sure that you have boarded the right flight this evening, we are talking about negotiating your worth.
I am the founder and CEO of 29 Bison. We are a middle market, human capital only focused mergers and acquisitions transition advisor. So first thing, when we consider the overall package of under the rubric of compensation, the conversation these days is using terminology called total rewards, but it includes items such as basic salary or wage. It can include things like bonuses, bonus potential. So you may be familiar with terms like discretionary bonus, short-term incentives, long-term incentives. Those generally tend to be the cash components of our compensation, but under the umbrella of total rewards are a whole bunch of other things. These can be your health and welfare benefits, like your medical, dental, short-term, long-term disability. They can be your paid time off benefits, so vacation time, personal time, sick time, leaves. Many organizations provide a variety of leaves, some of them discretionary, such as personal leaves that are uncompensated, others that are required from a compliance standpoint, such as the family leave or pregnancy or maternity leave, those kinds of things, depending on the state or jurisdiction you live in. Right. It also, your total compensation also includes other things. So it can be in things such as 401k match or pension and company provided pension benefit. It could be things like education reimbursement or on some kind of on-the-job training or apprentice capability. It may even include, we are working right now with an organization who, as part of their benefits, actually provides the physical tools that are required for an individual to perform the functions of their job. This is an organization that works in the renewable energy space. And so potentially, yes. I mean, you could be working for an employer that has a codified or at least a well-communicated compensation or total rewards philosophy. Even if they don't share it necessarily, it's something that lives in the back of their mind. So this includes things like, where in relation to other similar employers am I interested in compensating my employees? So this is generally a range, and it's, for the most part, it's expressed as a percentage. So you're looking at compensating individuals at a percentile of the overall marketplace, and organizations will kind of peg themselves. Do we want to be at the middle of that market, which would be the 50th percentile in the marketplace, which puts us halfway between the lowest compensated employees in the marketplace and the highest compensated employees in the marketplace. They could potentially have a different philosophy for different portions of the organization, depending on how tight the labor market is for a specific, highly qualified or in low supply portion of the labor market. It really depends. So in some cases, the more flexible portion of total compensation is the actual salary, wage, and base rewards component. In other circumstances, you could be working with an employer who is either bound, for example, by a collective bargaining agreement, in which case they have no flexibility to make adjustments to potentially any portion of their total rewards package, but specifically the wage component. It is possible that in places where an employer has greater levels of flexibility, they're willing to flex on some items, but not all items. So it could be additional time off, for example. It might be that bonus is a flexible component, the bonus range is a flexible component, but the base salary or compensation level, direct cash compensation, is not necessarily flexible for that employer. So as you're thinking through what you're interested in negotiating, understanding your organization's level of flexibility around various components of total rewards is a really important part of you situating yourselves well to have those negotiated conversations.
So one of the things we want to talk about in terms of knowing your worth, right? So this is pay scale. It's one of the ones, but for your purposes, are there other places that you can go to sort of get an idea of, hey, what I should be paid, based on what I'm doing, my job, that type of thing?
Yeah. So there are a number of them out there. Pay scale is the one that is most often referenced in the literature. It's one that we very often go to or recommend. Salary.com, Glassdoor. If you belong to a professional association or a trade and technical association, you may be able to get specific information about your area of professional expertise.
This talks about why people didn't ask for the raise, but we want to sort of talk about more is when do I ask for a raise? Now, if you go online and Google and stuff, and we'll talk about it in the next slide, how to ask for a raise, but there really isn't anything about when to ask for a raise. So is there a better time of the year or a better time in with the company that I should be asking for that?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of different things to think of. So one is understanding what your salary and compensation planning cycle is in the organization. Many organizations plan these. They happen either on an annual or on a semi-annual basis. Understand when that cycle happens. And it may or may not actually come consequent with your performance, the performance component of your salary planning process. Our recommendation always is to split those two things so that they don't happen simultaneously. Not all organizations do that, but know when that happens. It's better for you to put yourselves in a circumstance where you are walking through the negotiation conversation well in advance of that salary planning component, because it's quite possible that the process of the organization ties the hands of your manager to assist you with your salary negotiation if you do it too closely to the salary planning process. It almost becomes too late to have that conversation.
Just so I'm clear, Laura, just so I'm clear with that, do you mean like when I'm having my review type of thing?
I would do, so in some organizations, when you have your review, it's also the same as their merit planning or their salary planning cycle. In other organizations, they break them apart.
Yeah.
Knowing when that typically happens, you want to have this conversation about your raise well in advance of that, because the planning process that your manager, the HR department, the senior leadership goes through happens actually just following the budget period before the actual salary or compensation changes are communicated to employees.
How do I ask, right? So how is this conversation? Is this just, I want to schedule a time. I want to say, hey, how can I, do we set up a time to do this?
So yes, I'm going to skip back to doing your homework first, because this is partly about the how.
Right.
Making sure that you have done your own homework about yourself first. So cataloging for yourself, where is it that you've contributed to the organization? What skills have you acquired over the period of time between your last performance evaluation or your last salary increase? Where is it that you have stepped up or stepped into a void? Have you taken on someone else's responsibility in their absence? Have you volunteered for additional opportunities or additional responsibilities and accountabilities in your department, in another department? Have you flexed your time? Making sure that you're going through the process of cataloging those things and having those at the ready for you as you're prepping for and then in your conversation.
Any question?
Yes. So I would say it makes most sense to request the time and let your supervisor know why you're requesting the time. It's very difficult, particularly if it happens in the middle of the day, charging into your supervisor's office, your manager's office saying, I demand to have the conversation right now about my salary. Be as specific as possible. So if you go in and say, I'm looking for a 10% increase or a 7% increase that is $65,750. That's better than going and saying, well, I'm looking for something in the range of $60,000 to $70,000. So it may be that in your current employment circumstance, there's lots of opportunity for you to gain additional skill, take on additional responsibility, even expose yourself to things in the organization that would be beneficial to you in the long run. Even if it turns out that your current employer is not willing to compensate you for having done those things, you personally have to determine whether or not in the long run it benefits you to have those skills and those experiences that you may then have to decide I'm taking to another employer if at some point I work through this negotiation process and it doesn't play out for me. Am I better situated just in general for having done this, had these experiences, etc.?
Have questions? Ask us. We can help with that. You can email Craig at crichardson@aresfoundation.org, or you can visit the website to learn more about what we do and how we might be able to help you. www.aresfoundation.org. Want to see more of this recording? Go to www.aresfoundation.org/events. If you know an organization or community support group that could benefit from one of our workshops, reach out to Tom T. Alessi at aresfoundation.org. Our mission is trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money.